actually started to read a book called The Secret. I don't know if you've come across it. All about sort of manifesting law of attraction, the way that our thoughts change our lives and how we feel. And honestly, that book changed my life. I will say that. It really made me take a step back and think, oh my gosh, the way that I'm thinking is having this impact on my life. Like I'm willing all of this into existence because of how negative I think about myself. Something needs to change and I need to stop doing that. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't a case of waking up the next day and be like, I love who I am, you know, this is me, walking out with my hands in the air, like, you know, check me out. It definitely wasn't that at all. But one day I just made the conscious decision to start an Instagram blog, and it was never meant to be public. No one was ever really meant to read it. It was meant to just be a space for me to document progress and document my feelings. And if I managed to go out of the house one day without long sleeves on, I'd post a picture of that and be like, maybe a way of holding myself accountable, because it was being documented somewhere. And it was good for me to be able to look back and be like, you know, this is what I've achieved personally. And then through like using hashtags limb difference and things like that, I met other people online with limb differences, and I was like, oh, it's not just me. Like, wait a minute.
The only one.
Wait a minute. Wow, this is incredible. And I remember coming across one particular girl who had a hand just like me, and she'd got engaged and she was wearing a ring, which is something I never thought I would be able to do, because I didn't want to draw attention to my hands. I never wanted to be in that position where I had to wear a ring, so I was super like embarrassed about that. And I was like, do you know what? If I can see this girl living her life and doing that, and she's the exact same as me, then there's no reason why I can't do that. And that's what sort of then snowballed it into me being more motivated and feeling more encouraged to take this one step further and really push myself with what I felt like I could do. And then as I kept posting more, people kept following me. And then I was getting messages from people saying I'd had that effect on them, where they'd seen my posts and they then felt confident to do something because they'd seen me do it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, it's like a full circle moment. And that feeling is like nothing I could describe. That amazing feeling knowing that I'd taken the step to do something and it's made my life a little bit better, but I've also been able to share that and be completely raw and honest with how I'm feeling, and that's helped somebody else. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. Something I never thought I'd be able to do. So yeah, it literally went from there. And then because I was getting these amazing messages, it just made me like carry on. And here we are, like 4 years later now, 2019, I think that started. So yeah, it's been a ride.
It's so interesting because I very, very clearly remember seeing the first post of yours that I was like, oh, like you're like, we're kind of similar. I mean, like very different, but also kind of similar. And it was because it was something that really upset me. So I know it upset you. And I remember your post about it. And it was when the witches made Anne Hathaway have her hands completely different. And it was the whole conversation between why is it acceptable to put a villain or like, you know, make a villain disabled, because that is only ever going to perpetuate all of the issues that the disabled community have. You're literally just making it 10 times harder. And I remember it so well because I remember thinking like, oh my goodness, this gal, like, because I think you wrote on your hands, didn't you, something like you're beautiful or like I'm not a witch. And I remember reading that and thinking the world needs to see that, because at this point in time Hollywood has just given arguably one of their biggest female stars the worst role ever.
Honestly, during that time I'd not really started posting videos at all at that time. And I remember this all came out and I'd seen an article about it, and the feeling that I got in my stomach, I was just so full of like, I needed to do something, like I needed to say something. And at this point I maybe had like 400 followers, so I wasn't intending to go and speak to a massive audience of people, but I just knew I had to say something
Yeah.
and just a way to document how I was feeling and just get it out. And I just came home from work, put my hair up in a bobble, had a jumper on, no makeup, anything, and just spoke to my camera and just like posted it.
Yeah.
And then that video just like went, and so many people were just watching it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I did not expect this at all. And then over the next few days, that's when I just decided, I was thinking about my hands, and I was like, my hands look exactly like this witch that is being
Yeah.
shown in this horrible film about how, she's such an evil character, and this is a characteristic she's being given to enhance that scary vibe.
Yeah.
And I was like, my hands aren't scary. If you'd have asked me 5 years ago, I'd have said, yes, they are. But I'm not in that mindset anymore. And I don't want a 3-year-old with the same disability as me to see that and then that reaffirm the message in their head that it is something that's scary. So I was looking at my hands. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write beautiful on my hand and just take a picture and post it. And I never, ever thought that it would be a picture that made a difference or anything, but that picture went everywhere. And whenever I speak to people on podcasts, that is a picture that always gets brought up. And I still to this day don't realize how many people actually saw that picture.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like the key, I think, into where my Instagram journey sort of went to where it is now.
Yeah, of
That
course.
was like the very start of it.
And I love that because like I love it when people kind of like fall into what they're doing and they're like, I just wanted to speak some truth, and like now it's snowballed and here we are. Like I think that's always like the best way. When you start something, it's always the best way to do it, rather than being like, I'm going to do this because I want this out of it and I'm going to get this much money and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, like you really got like, it's got really good intentions behind that. But everything that you just said is like actually, and what I loved is that you spoke about you never want to see like a younger person with the same disability as you and feel like, that they're different and like that they're not beautiful, because that's something that I think about quite a lot as well. Is it, I always think, what if there's a younger version of me who's not as confident, or a younger person with a different disability, and they can hear like these conversations and even listen to them and be like, oh, like they're doing okay, so that means that I can do okay. And like for me, I think that's the biggest thing in the world, and it sounds pretty similar to you. I think that there's nothing better than being able to help younger people on that journey of actually being like, yeah, you are disabled, but actually it's freaking awesome.